Hi, welcome to Album Review Tarot with me, Deandra Reviews. Check out deandrareviewsitall.com where I review entertainment for the light it gives, and please start following me and my artist journey. Today, for Album Review Tarot, I pick some of my favorite artists, review their newest albums, and pull some oracle cards, really, for what energy, their song, and what message their music and this review is kind of giving to the viewer. It's all random, it's all in the moment, and it's all about building. And today we're talking about Bishop Briggs, When Everything Went Dark, which I believe came out, if I'm not mistaken, June 23rd. Yeah, so this week actually. It was. I've been a fan for a long time of Bishop Briggs, and let's start shuffling. I'm using Sacred Rebels Oracle because I just think it brings about a lot of peace, a lot of love, and all about building. And if there's one thing about Bishop Briggs' old music, and that's gonna be interesting fact, is that she's very influenced by Japanese karaoke. It's been like synchronized into a bunch of films because she's always like, I'm gonna rise again, and bringing in those elements of heaven and hell, and just this feeling of like the world can tear you down, but I will rise the frick up. And then again, I mean, if Japanese karaoke is an influence, it's gonna be a bop. Like it's very synth bass, like brr, okay. Yeah, listen to my music because it already sounds good, right? And let's start pulling some. And she's definitely, you listen to a lot of her old work. She's definitely a go-to to like pump you up in terms of the gym, but also in terms of like that fantasy life that we all live when we're walking sometimes, like we're in a movie or we're running, but we're running, to save the day. She has this really natural imaginativeness, in part because she's very naturally spiritual, always using those elements and those images of the worst of hell versus the best of heaven. And the cards that I pulled out are really interesting. I pulled out five, and the first two are faith in the process after the storm. And if you see, it's like this woman praying, and she's just like, please God help me, and there's like these little birdies surrounding her, and it just says faith, like she's literally kneeling like on a, I don't know what this is called, something, those little four-wheelers that you pull kids in, faith. And after the storm. And I love this card in particular because usually you pull this card after the worst has happened. And in a way, yeah, that is her old time music. And I didn't even realize that I would pull cards with that energy, but it totally makes sense. And both of these cards are about trusting that if the worst can happen, so can the best. And that's really, really, really hard. And part of why I love Bishop Briggs and why I find her so freaking inspiring. There's just, I think for me as an artist, and you could follow me on Deandra Reviews It All, and you could follow my comedy web series, Deandra Socks, because who doesn't have a web series nowadays? But I do everything out of healing. And I do out of healing because I want my music to give hope, despite the fact that sometimes I don't have it. And that kind of connects to what is already with you and visions of life beyond death. These are two really important cards, and I love them. If you see like the hands holding up the the butterflies flying away from it, and this old woman just having every animal on earth covering her third eye. I think that these two cards in particular, they're so important because often even I forget how much I have to offer because you haven't received much. The scale has felt tilted towards lack, towards negativity. And these two cards represent a feeling that all you need is within you. You can provide for you enough spiritually to eventually do so materially. And I think visions of life beyond death it's a legacy card, but it's not just about what you leave on earth, how you want the world to be impressed by you as much as how you want the world to impress you. And that involves living a life that is absolutely authentic and real and true to you. And the last card is collaborative dreaming. And I love this card because what it really is just trying to say is, find the people in your life that will make you feel like it's not just about what you leave on this earth, but what you take from it. And I think a lot of artists, because we struggle so much financially, spiritually, mentally, we're constantly in this vulnerable, unsafe space, writing and inspiring music that talks about getting to that safe space, getting to that safety. I think that dichotomy can really make us hopeless. And it kind of, Bishop has always sung to that dichotomy. But when everything went dark is about you think you have it bad, wait till life punches you in the face. Because often as artists, and I think as people, especially post pandemic, we're all suffering a little bit from depression and sadness and hopelessness. And it's this feeling that I've done so much with my life that I haven't wanted. Yes, I'm surviving, but when do I get to the living part? And does that only mean spiritual? Like, yes, I know what it is to go hungry. Yes, I know what it is to kind of have to save a dime and kind of maneuver through mazes of people and their own manipulations and intentions. But on the flip side, I would like to learn via joy, and not the joy that I make off of gratitude lists or a good song, but like hearing people hear that song, seeing myself in places where I'm warm. And I'm not just thankful for a warm blanket on a cold day, like I'm actually in a warm place. Um, and when everything went dark is, if you don't know, in the past few years, Bishop had a baby, but she also lost her sister. And it's the sadness of that situation of bringing life while losing life all at once really warped her into a severe depression because she got super existential. She started wondering the meaning of life and moreover the meaning of grief. I love that WandaVision quote. Grief is just love, you know, mourning what it had. I think it goes something like that. Or grief is feeling, God, I forget the quote, but it's something like that, mourning what it had or remembering what it had. And I pulled out some numerology cards, particularly for manifestation. And it is first quarter moon, keep your heart open. First quarter moon in Taurus, release control. So this is Libra Taurus, which are highly compatible in terms of love and romance. And what I love about these two cards is when everything went dark is about releasing your control over life and your sadness, because that's the thing about sadness, it makes you feel like it has, like you can, as long as you hold it, you can control something because that feels real. Your grief, you lost a sister, that's freaking real. And I'm trying to remember all the songs. I have a list right here of them. They were, I mean, High Water came out a year ago, Reborn, Baggage. I loved Baggage and I love Bad. And I thought that they were both two songs. Bishop Briggs has one of the best voices out there, and I'm just going to say that. And part of what I love about her vocality, is that it's so like deep and rich, and it's a surprising range for how like solid and almost it's like it's in a box and it's just beating that box. And the whole album is about what happens to you when life gives you a real reason to be sad about. Like you're sad because you don't know if you're living the life you're supposed to. What happens when something happens that you're like, shit, like darkness is meant to be, I guess. Because that's the trippy part. Bad things are meant to be as much as good things. And when you don't feel like you're achieving, bad things might feel like the only real thing because you don't necessarily feel like you're achieving good. And that's why last quarter moon in Cancer, it's so interesting. A lot of quarters, first quarter, last quarter, and a new moon. New moon in Pisces. Cancer and Pisces are all about feelings, and it's take a breather and attune to the divine. New moon, attuned to the divine. New moon is all about summoning, knowing what you're supposed to get. And last quarter moon in Cancer is kind of prepping, like something's coming. You're either going to get a full moon or a new moon, but you're either going to release or receive, but you have to be prepared for both. And this whole album was about kind of releasing your rage and realizing that you can't control it. It controls you. It just makes you feel like you're controlling it. All that anger, all that depression is, it's not your friend. And it may make you feel satisfied, but it'll never make you feel happy. It may make you feel like a martyr, but it'll never make you feel stable and safe. It makes you feel safe in the fact that you're not safe. And it's always like this weird manipulation because depression is born from the ego, and the ego is born from pain. And this whole album is about like a really bad ego death. Here you're supposed to be having the happiest moment of your life. And I never forget one of my mom's oldest friends. We went to the funeral for his sister, and he went up and he said it's worse than losing a parent, losing a sibling, in part because it's kind of like, he said it was like losing a limb. Your parents are your guides, but there's a feeling of camaraderie with your siblings, like your soldiers learning about life, going through its battles, going through its highs and lows together. There's no power competition. You look up to your parents, but you look here, eye to eye to your siblings. And I never forget that. And you get that feeling with when everything went dark. And it's still a bop. Like, it's still an album that you can dance to and move to. She never loses that feeling of inspiring movement, but it felt a little more like As I Move. It just felt a little softer, a little gentler. Like, you might sway, whereas in her old music, you would just like bash and be like, yeah, I'm gonna kick the world because it kicked me. This is kind of like the world kicked me, and let me lie down and let me zen out and let me figure that out. So the last few cards I want to pull is just a message for you on what you need to be doing right now, what you're doing and what you're not doing. So we got assertion upside down, and one is about wishes and dreams. And if there's one thing this album is all about, is part of why we feel so sad in life, especially when you compare it to Bishop Briggs' old music, is that we don't feel like we're living our dream. We don't feel like we're going after them. We don't have any knowledge on how to. And even if we do, it's terrifying because I could work really hard and go nowhere. I could be a hamster. I already feel like a hamster already, like on a hamster wheel, doing with what I don't want. But if what I want rejects me, that just ego death to the max. And then something like your sister dies, while you're trying to give birth to a new life and you really thought she would be there. Something like that happens, like it happened to Bishop Briggs, and suddenly dreams take a whole nother meaning. They mean something you have to achieve, but you're still terrified of, because you have to go for them more than ever, because you know that life is frail. And this is advice on how to do that. We get influence. Put yourself out there. Put yourself out there in terms of what you are able to give to this world, what you want to give to this world, what you want to get from this world. Put yourself out there. And if you see, it's Adam and Eve and the snake, and he's manipulating them. But remember, a snake is still a snake. You've got power. You're a human being. You can turn your life around. You could say no to any snake, any delusion, any ego that's trying to make you believe that you shouldn't be the spirit that you are. Which brings us to discovery, number 9, which means finalization. All about figuring you out, discovering you, not just always planning, but acting and planning afterwards. Be a little impulsive, take a little risk, figure things out as you're going, not beforehand, because are you really moving? How many plans are we going to make, people? And generosity. I really get the sense with this card. One thing I love about it, you see God and you see people, as usual, always begging him. But one thing about this card that I love is that it means being generous with yourself as well. And I think that that's the energy that I'm getting over all of this. There's so many points of our life where we were sad, and then we look back and we're like, why the hell was I sad? Or I could have handled that better. And yet we continue with the same behaviors, and we continue handling our present like the past, until our present becomes the past, and in the future we're grieving still the same thing, regrets. And it's unfortunate for Bishop Briggs that her sister dying kind of woke her up to these behaviors of sadness that she always moved with. And that's why this album, this EP rather, is just so beautiful. And it feels like a preview to a really bright future for her, because it's all about realizing that life can genuinely get dark. And the reason you feel so bad is because you don't think you're going for your light, and you want the world to stop being so heavy on you. And it just doesn't. It really, really doesn't. You have to be light with you until the world gets lighter. You have to be your best friend, no matter what. And I think she learned that lesson. And the EP is called When. Oh my God, I totally blanked on the EP. The EP is called When Everything Went Dark, and it's by Bishop Briggs, and I highly, 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 highly recommend it. And check it out. Thank you.